Oh, is that right? Don't like the iPad. Get away with it. Somebody said that was Bob. Tell me all about it. All the time. Well, not yet. This way, get that every. What's that? Just got rid of it. Yeah. Let's just turn it down. I have a big cheese. No. Just listen closely. That's right. Don't use your thoughts. Because your thoughts. No, I think I'm going to do it. Yeah. I'm trying to avoid Yeah, it's true. I don't think that's a good metaphor, though. Yeah, I don't want to hear it. You guys probably pass each other on the highway? Yeah, well, that's true. No, it makes sense. I can believe that. Oh yeah, I agree.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me at the back of the room all right? Okay, if anybody doesn't have a chair, we still have 5 here at the front. It was like watching church, although I'm not a pastor, but it was like watching church to see the room fill from the back first. Anyway, my name is Nigel Belsinger. I am a local government consultant, for want of a better term. I work with municipal governments across the province in one fashion or another. I have not been engaged for any purposes ever by the OPP, at least not in a. I've met some officers in a professional capacity. That's been quite a while ago. And I have some friends and neighbors actually who are or were with the Ontario Provincial Police. That's my only connection there. And I've not had any engagements with the town of Espanola either. So I'm quite neutral to whatever is going on here tonight in terms of one position one way or the other. I've done this before for a number of forums like this, and I also chair a number of other public meetings for different ventures. I was a former municipal CAO like Cynthia. I worked in a couple of counties in southern Ontario where I live now, and I took early retirement some years ago from the City of London as Commissioner of Finance and City Treasurer. So just give you a sense of my background. My role today is to sort of act a little bit like the ringmaster, although I don't think there's any need for whips and chairs or anything like that. The purpose of this meeting is a public meeting. It's not a council meeting. And in fact, councillors at a meeting like this, because it's not a council meeting where there's a quorum present, there's a quorum of council present. They're not allowed to actually express their opinions on anything. Otherwise, what you find out is technically an illegal council meeting breaks out. So don't be surprised if you attempt to address a question to a member of council and I stop you and say, no. Council's here tonight to listen, to hear the kinds of questions and issues that you're interested in helping them make the determination that they have to face with respect to this issue at a later date. Excuse me. So they're going to be listening, they're going to be listening very intently. What the purpose of the meeting is to hear presentations from a number of parties. Ms. Townsend, on behalf of the town and the analysis that she has done with the assistance of what's the proper name of the group? Police Options Committee. That's a unique name to the town the town has put together in order to this small group in order to make sure a thorough analysis was done. And you'll see her report gives an analysis that reflects the input of the Police Options Committee. We'll also have a presentation by Chief Zimmerman, and did I get the names right? Yeah, Chief Zimmerman, and then Ed Storch on behalf of the Police Association will have a few words that he'd like to offer. The representatives here from the OPP tonight will not be making a formal presentation, although they are here and available to answer specific questions that you might have about how they conduct their service, their business, and what it would look like if they were contracted for the service for the town. And rather than me introducing them and their particular positions, because I suspect all of you know Mr. Chief Zimmerman, Mr. Storch, and Ms. Townsend, I'm going to ask Kelly Withrow to introduce her colleagues here. Kelly is the sergeant with the Municipal Police Service, or Municipal Policing Group, located at headquarters in Aurelia. Kelly, could you introduce your colleagues here?
Sure can.
Oh yes, we have to turn the mics on so you can hear.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here, first off, and thank you everybody for coming. So, as Maya said, my name is Kelly Withrow. I am a sergeant with the OPP, and I am a municipal policing specialist with the Municipal Policing Bureau. With me to my left is Linda Davis. She is a municipal policing specialist with the Municipal Policing Bureau with the OPP. And to my right is Inspector Yves Forget, who is a regional representative for Northeast Region.
Okay, thank you very much. So with their backgrounds in mind, if you have some questions about the service of the OPP provides and would provide, you can get a sense of to whom you would like to pose your question. So I'm going to call on Ms. Townsend first to provide us with her presentation.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully everyone will be able to hear me okay. And for anyone that's seen the presentation on Tuesday night, I apologize that it's exactly the same. So just as a bit of a background, because this process has been going on for quite some time, the council requested an OPP costing back in January of 2015. But at that time, there was a moratorium on costings, and which was lifted in November 2015. The first meetings with the OPP occurred in April of 2016, with the site visit of our police station in July 2016. And then there was a lot of discussions back and forth, and anyone that was following it and, through the council minutes would know that there was some discussion on our building and the best way to service the community. So our final proposal was received on September 20th of 2017. The OPP was back on November 9th and attended a Q&A for council. The building cost estimates were received December 1st. March 20th, the OPP was back again to do a presentation on the billing model. And then our original deadline, which would have been March 20th, was extended to May 22nd of 2018. So that's the deadline really we have to respond. Before I go to the next slide, I guess I should just say that throughout this time, the Policing Options Committee was meeting, and that committee consisted of Constable Ed Storch, our police chief, Mary Lou Mick, the Chair of the Police Services Board, Councillor Foster, Councillor Yoakum, and myself. Just because it's been quite some time since the OPP has done their presentation, I stole some of their slides, which demonstrated, how they would police our community. So currently, the OPP has 2 zones, Espanola and Manitoulin, and with the proposed policing of town of Espanola, we would become the 3rd zone. So this was just a slide of the geography, I guess. It's quite a huge area, and the town of Espanola is the red box closer to the bottom of the screen, and that's where we would fit in the third sector. So this was their proposed amalgamated structure with the detachment commander. And then I guess the most important part would be the 4 platoons with the 6 constables in Espanola for the 4 platoons. Then we would also have other staff as well, operations manager, staff sergeant, 1 analyst, the crime unit, 2 detective constables in Espanola, a community safety officer, and a court officer, as well as 2 administrative positions. So this next slide shows the Espanola Police Service now as it is, we have 12 full-time uniformed officers, 1 full-time detachment admin clerk, 4 full-time dispatchers, and 3 part-time dispatchers. I'm not going to go through the numbers for what's currently existing with the detachment from Manitoulin and Espanola, and the proposed amalgamated complement. Just looking at the last column, those would be the full-time equivalents billed back to the municipality. So we would have 0.2 of an inspector, 0.2 of a staff sergeant, 2 sergeants, 9 plus 1 constables, for a total of 12.4 uniformed officers. I guess I should just explain that the RLD, for anyone that missed it at the first presentation, means rank level determination. So that 1 would represent our police chief that would have to go through the rank level determination process. And then the next bottom part of the slide, the detachment admin clerk, we would be down to 1 admin or civilian staff. And again, I apologize, I know this is very small, but because the process was delayed for so long, we did receive updated figures, so I just wanted to present those. And so this is the same slide, I just tried to blow up the totals. So basically with salaries and benefits for uniform members, civilians, and support staff, the costs are $2,021,655, with other direct operating expenses of $148,865. We get $2,170,519, which would be the estimated gross policing costs. Then we have some 1-year adjustments, a credit of $23,644, and one-time cost of $325,539. Sorry, that mostly reflects 4 patrol vehicles, uniforms, equipment, and radio equipment. Those were the largest items there. So this is just a bit more of a breakdown. So in doing the comparison to our figures for I used the 2017 budget, that's because the 2018 budget hasn't been passed yet, and there are some irregular one-time items in our 2018 budget. I've highlighted here the expenditures for police chief and civilian personnel, because certainly with the first 3 years of the transition contract, that's where we will see the savings.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, so for the first 3 years that we move into the transition contract under the OPP, that would be where the savings come from, or a result of. It reflects the change in the first 3 years. It might be clearer as we go through the slides. So this is just the remainder of the police service budget. So for 2017, the net departmental costs were $2,270,483. So that was my starting point when comparing to Espanola Police Services costs. So this is the transition period comparison. So for Espanola Police Service, I basically took 2% per year, plus I adjusted in items that were in the 10-year capital plan. And then for the OPP numbers as well, I took the costing and I used a 2% indexing of costs to be consistent. So the net savings over the first 3 years range from $337,800 in what I'm assuming to be 2019. I'm assuming it'll take about a 6-month transition period if we were to vote that way. And then in 2021, the savings would be $356,380. The bottom half of the slide, that shows the one-time transition costs. So the $325,539, those were the costs provided by the OPP. Severance, pension, and other costs have been estimated at $1,219,936. Legal costs, we've just estimated at $25,000. And the building renovation costs are estimated at $450,000. So that's for both police stations, the one in town and the one at the highway. So after the first 3 years of the transition contract with the OPP, then we move into the OPP billing model. And so these are the components of the billing model. The base calls for service, overtime, court security, prisoner transportation, accommodation and cleaning services, and then the enhancements for the municipality we choose. So to calculate the base service costs, the OPP's base service costs for 2018 are $191.35. The number of households and the number of commercial and industrial properties I took from the impact analysis. So I came up with 2,594 properties. And then I indexed that again by the 2%. So in 2022, the base cost I'm estimating to be $516,220. I apologize again, I know this slide is a little hard to read. So basically how we estimated the calls for service was we took Espanola Police Services UCR codes, Uniform Crime Reporting codes, and then we matched them to the OPP template for estimating calls for service. So the total there comes up to $709,978. So this is 3 years, but we did actually do 5 years of analysis and came up with roughly the same figure. So a little bit more information on the calls for service. Espanola Police Service logs an average of 3,470 calls or incidents under the UCR system, and approximately 48% of those transfer over to the OPP billing model. The other 52% don't transfer over. There's a few reasons for that. A lot of those calls are Highway Traffic Act calls, and those are considered under the base level of service, so they don't count as a call for service under the template. There's also things such as criminal record checks that are recorded in our system, but don't count as a call for service under the OPP model. And then there were two other codes that I looked into, and they were provincial responsibility, so they didn't transfer over either. So there is a risk that the actual calls for service could be recorded differently by the OPP, and that those costs could vary from the estimates provided. So again, under this billing model, I used 2% to index the cost per year from 2018 to 2022. Overtime was estimated at the OPP provincial average, 5.41%. Court security, I assumed one full-time equivalent for the post-transition contract. Prisoner transportation, I believe it's $2.18 or 19 cents. Currently, so I indexed that again at 2% per year. Contract enhancements, so that would be for anything that wouldn't be covered under the OPP's base level of service, I guess. But, you know, for example, if we wanted to add in a school liaison officer or something additional to what's provided under the basic code. So I estimated that, excuse me, at 6.5% of the total base plus the calls for service. So I used 6.5% because that seemed to be the average of the Section 10 municipalities that I was able to extrapolate that information on the Excel worksheet. So this, again, I know it's small, the presentation is available online as well. So basically, for years 2022 to 2028, this summarizes what I've estimated our OPP costs to be. And another item to add, I guess, at the bottom would be bylaw enforcement. We have added a provision in there, as you know, the OPP could do bylaw enforcement as an enhancement, for example, but it's probably more efficient for the municipality to provide it themselves. So the total cost then ranged from $1,734,460 in 2022 to $1,950,840 in year 2028. So this just includes the revenues that we would still be able to maintain going forward. We would still benefit from the RIDE grant and the Court Security Prisoner Transportation grant. We would still benefit from criminal records checks and other enforcement bylaw, parking, etc. So overall, so in comparison for the post-transition contract, I guess, with the OPP billing model, it's estimated that we would save over the full 10 years $5,651,763. So I just wanted to note that the committee also thought it was important to have an independent review of these numbers, and KPMG has provided an independent review, and council also has a copy of their report. And you know, they verified all key assumptions utilized in the analysis. So this is just a slide of the cumulative costs and savings. As I showed you earlier, the upfront one-time costs were just over $2 million. It takes a few years for us to recover that. We would probably break even in the fifth year of our analysis, and after that, we would save approximately $1 million per year. So one thing we did just to see, if it was reasonable compared to what other OPP police communities were paying. I calculated currently, as if in 2018, if we were already an OPP police community and we were already using the billing model, I estimated our per property cost would be $572. And then the OPP produces the summary of all the OPP police communities. So the range of those municipalities are $245 to $721 per property. I looked at a sample of 6 similar sized municipalities that were Section 10. So Section 10 are communities under contract. Otherwise, there's also a lot of Section 5 communities that are policed by OPP. So the sample of 6 similar sized communities, their per property costs range from $269 to $632. So with our 572, it seems that we were reasonable in comparison. Another comparison we looked at was the overall crime severity index. So this just provides a summary then of the crime severity index from 2005 to 2016 for Espanola as the red line, the Ontario average, which is the greenish line, the OPP average is purple, and the municipal average is blue. So what this shows us, obviously Espanola fluctuates a little bit more just because of the size of our population being so small, but it's pretty reasonable in comparison to all these municipalities. So Espinola's crime statistics do not indicate that there would be a significant need for calls for service, which would negatively impact our projected costs. So another question that people may have is how would the OPP utilize the 2 facilities? So it is expected that the following positions would physically be located at the current Espanola Police Station. The detachment commander, so that would be about 20% of his time. An analyst, a crime unit detective sergeant, again 20% of that individual's time. An administrative position, community safety officer, court security officer, and 2 detective constables. The Highway 17 location would be the reporting location for which the constables would report in and out. So currently, the Espanola Police Station is open to the public 24/7. If we were to transfer to the OPP, or become an OPP police community, our office would be open during regular office hours, and then there would be a phone outside that you pick up and they automatically call. Criminal reference checks would still be done at our local office during regular office hours. So just in summary, Espanola Police Services is a community-based police service. The OPP provides an integrated policing model. The one-time transition costs are estimated to be $2,020,475. Bylaw enforcement will still be required. Savings during the transition period will range from $337,800 to $356,800 over the 3 years. It is estimated that the transition costs will be fully recovered in year 5, which would most likely be 2023. Savings under the current billing model could be approximately $1 million per year. And then I just thought it was important to note that approximately 90% of policing costs are wages and benefits, In year 4, the cost reductions may come with a reduction in full-time equivalents. That's kind of an unknown at this point. So the estimated savings over the 10-year period amount to $5,651,763. This assumes the billing model will remain the same or similar for the period. There will be no significant impact to policing costs or grants. The financial projections are always best estimates at a point in time and subject to change. So that concludes my part. And, so next,
Well, Chief Zimmerman's coming forward. Cynthia, I have to tell you, that's probably the most thorough presentation on a subject matter like this I've seen in my career as a municipal person. You have the benefit of a CAO here, and she and I have never met before, but you have the benefit of a CAO who holds 2 accounting designations, a certified management accountant and a chartered accountant. And that certainly came out in the presentation in terms of the assumptions and the detail and the structure. I appreciate that many of those slides, when I first saw it, I said the same thing to her. A lot of those detailed Excel charts, people won't be able to read from the back of the room. But I think they were necessary to show you the kind of level of detail she went through in order to get to that one bar graph that showed the negative costs in the early years and the savings in the future years. So you get a sense of that. There's one key element in there that, and I'm not making a pitch or anything here, but just I think it was important to know. She made reference to having the figures reviewed by KPMG. KPMG is one of the big 6 accounting firms and consulting firms worldwide. So in terms of, are they just her numbers all by yourself? There's some credibility behind them, and they've been supported by that. So that's very good. So you can get a sense, I think, of that. If you have questions of Cynthia, she'll be available after everybody's made their presentation for your questions on any of those items. So Chief, come on forward and we'll move the projector back to make sure your show fits perfectly. Okay, thank you.
I make a better moderator than a techie.
There you go. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm acting Chief of Police Todd Zimmerman. I've been with this service for the last 4 months. I'm here to tell you that you have a good police service. You also, the OPP, are a good police service. It depends on what type of a police service you want for your community. I want to start off by thanking the councillors for giving me this opportunity to speak. I know I haven't personally met every one of you yet, but thank you for this opportunity. The Police Services Board is here. Mary Lumek is our chair, and Bill Foster is also on the Police Service Board. I want to thank them for giving me this opportunity. We have several police officers and civilian members, both current and retired, in the room. And I would ask that you please stand up, because everyone should know that you're here. So, retired and current serving members, thank you very much. We also have community groups that we're highly involved with that are here today. The OPP representatives that we partner with when we need help. So I thank you for that as well. But most importantly, we have a lot of citizens from Espanola, and I want to just personally thank you for coming out. Thank you very much. So just to give you a little bit of what we currently have as far as the Espanola Police Service, it was established in 1958. We police an area of 93.31 square kilometers. We respond to about 4,000 calls annually, and we are a community-focused police service. We're in the community, we want to engage with the community, we get highly involved in the community. Our current authorized strength is 1 chief, 2 sergeants, and 9 constables. We have 1 administrative court clerk, and to give you a little bit of understanding what that means is that person is the administrative assistant to the chief of police, also deals with all the court matters, the court briefs, attends court, sets court times and everything else, and does a whole bunch of other things, freedom of information requests, pretty much does a whole ton of things. That's what that role is. We have 4 time communicators and 3 part-time communicators. And all of your communicators are from this community. And that's something I think you need to know. So when people call up and in distress and they talk, they may not know the exact address, but yeah, we're here, we're close to Winkles, we're close to here. They know exactly what they're talking about. And with a local dispatch center, you have that ability where they know exactly where you are. So what else they do? We also have fire dispatch contracts for the Espanola Fire Department, Massey, Sable, Spanish Rivers, McCarroll, Baldwin, Sagamore, Whitefish Falls, and Warncliffe and Keenan. I hope I said everything properly. And that is, you do get some revenue from having that dispatch center and having those fire services contracted for you. I just want to talk about calls for service a little bit. I hope you can see this, but our average response times from 2015, 2016, and 2017 for all calls. That's everything from a serious call to a neighbor dispute to a bylaw is 8 minutes to 8 minutes and 56 seconds when we receive the call and we get to the call. I'm not talking about dispatched because that's a lot quicker, but I'm talking when we get the call until we get there. So that response time is pretty good. When you look at priority 0, those calls are a little bit skewed because they're a lot quicker than that. And the reason being is priority 0 includes the pursuit failed to stop. So that usually the person is failing to stop isn't stopping, so it's hard to get to the place when we're still running away from us until we disengage. And another one is called a unit emergency. So if the officer is on a scene, and let's say it's a domestic and they're doing an interview and they haven't reported back to the communication center within an hour, it's going to set off an alarm. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to verify that the person is okay, or they might be involved in something and they can't respond, and we know they're okay. The alarm comes off, and that kind of skews the time. Just so you understand, the times are actually a little bit better than what the report says. And when you look at the response times, we work 2 shifts, start at 7 in the morning and at 7 at night for the officers. So if a call comes in at 6:30, either in the morning or at night, it's probably not going to be dispatched right away unless it's an emergency call. So that length of time to get there is going to be extended because we're waiting for a shift change. If it's not a priority. Priority, we're there right away. So that skews the numbers a little bit too, because these are actual numbers when we get it to when we respond. And looking at the census data, we have a population of 5,312, but that doesn't take into account the people that come to our community to work, whether it be the hospital. It doesn't take into account the people that come here in the summer months or winter months for snowmobiling to enjoy the community that we have. So we have more people that are living here, that are coming in, that are being policed by your police service. So when you look at the ratio of officers for population, and it's done on a per 100,000. We don't have 100,000 people here. But if we had 100,000 people, you'd have 231.7 police officers. You know how many we have, it's 12. When you compare other similar communities, and I'm not talking about necessarily OPP communities, I'm talking about municipal communities, from 5,000 to 15,000 people, Hanover has 166.6 officers for that ratio, which is significantly less than we have. Elmer has 173.7, Brockville 178, Dryden 263.2, so they actually have, you know, a better ratio of police officers to the population. Gananoque 263.6, and just so you understand, Gananoque has 14 police officers. Okay, just to compare. Shelburne 225.8, Sterling 175.6, and Smith Falls 244.8. So we're not bad with the ratio of police officers we have to handle our community, is what I'm trying to get at there. Another thing, Cynthia talked about the crime severity index. So I just got this reported from 2016. So for overall crime statistics, Espanola ranked 12th out of 54 services with 80.7 calls that are coming in. When you have violent crimes that are coming in and being resolved and solved by the officers, Espanola is 9th in the province. So we're resolving these serious calls very well with the current service that you have. Non-violent calls, out of 54 again, Espanola is at 13 in the province. So again, we're doing really good on the non-serious calls. And when you do weighted clearance rates, and included in this is Ontario and Canada, Espanola is ranked 25th out of that 54. Ontario, for their weighted clearance weights, is 34, and Canada is down at 40. So again, we're doing pretty good with the service that you have. And then when you go look at criminal code offenses per officer, so the highest ranked one is Sarnia, who has 48.1 criminal code offenses per officer. We're ranked at 33, where we have 26.8 criminal offenses per officer. So again, that's akin to the community that we live in. We're not living in a high crime area, but the officers are still dealing with a lot of incidents. I don't know if you can read this, but this is the operating budget. I do have 2018 included in there to give you a reference. So when you look at salaries and wages, the officers, this is actually an older slide, but anyways, I'll just explain it. So officers is 71% of the budget. The civilian members is 19% of the budget, which makes up that total of $2,306,502 in 2018. Materials and supplies, that's at 4%. So that's every piece of equipment. That's cars, that's radios, that's paper, that's anything that you talk about that we need to operate, live scans, everything. That's only 4% of our total budget. And then when you look at the frontline policing grants and the unusual one-time costs, that one-time cost is my contract as I'm acting, and additional legal fees that are anticipated due to the situation the service is in right now. So that's that 150. And we did put 25,000 into a reserve for larger purchases in the future. That could be a radio system, that could be a new vehicle, that could be the proper equipment we need to deal with drug recognition,
anything that we're going to have to get, put a little bit of reserve away so you're prepared for it. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the last reservation. So I did have a visual slide, and basically you're not going to see this, but please come and see me if you want to. It's a pie chart that just explains what I talked about. And the blue, if you could see it, is police salaries, which is really not going to change with 12 officers. That significantly. The orange is for the civilian members, and all the other factors, whether it's materials, capital reserve, or our other services, it's just a small portion of the pie. So this slide talks about we're community-based policing, and we rely heavily on being involved with our partners. These are just a few of the partners that we have. There's a numerous amounts more. I, as the chief, and there's other members that sit with me, I'm involved with the Espanola Area Community of Care Planning Network. Killarney Sector for CEMC alternate, which is your emergency management, your emergency disaster situation. Mike Pecor is the CEMC on the alternate. Mike Pecor is your fire chief. The Espanola Area Safety Coalition, making your community safer. I'm involved in that. The Clash Foothills Drug Strategy. I'm sure people have been hearing about the opioid crisis and fentanyl and everything that's happening in Western Canada and coming across east. That group tries to make things better in our community. Involved in the mental health subcommittee. Involved in the Espanola Area Community Mobilization Table. And what that table, it's a new thing that's being initiated. The police service wrote for some grants for the mental health unit. The LIN, it's called, which is able to provide this service in our community. And that's for people that are at high risk for being in trouble. They might be going to the hospital a whole bunch of times. They might be dealing with the police a whole bunch of times. Might be dealing with public health, but it's not necessarily something the police can deal with. So the community gets together at a table. How can we best help this person, this high-risk individual, to help get them the resources they need? And that table is just being formed in your community, with the police service being the lead. Also involved the sexual assault, domestic violence treatment program. That's actually on the island, and Espanola is part of that committee and group. It's spearheaded by, of course, the island and the OPP. But if we have people that are subject to sexual assaults or domestic violence, this is a treatment program that can be available to this community as well. So that's why we want to be engaged with that. Also involved the Community Threat Assessment Steering Committee. A lot of that deals with the schools. So if a student's having a hard time in the schools, it's a threat assessment. It's to get the help for that student. And your community, your police service does that too. And of course, I'm involved with the Zone 1A, with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, as well as the OPP and other communities of our size. So that's just a few, and I could probably go on for 3 hours on what all the other community partners we're involved with. And a lot of them are up on the chart there. As I've said several times, we are committed to the community. That is our motto. That's in our business plan, and that's what we thrive to do. You have a police services board, civilian oversight, from your community. All 5 members are from your community. They care about your community. They help guide us with our business plan, a 3-year business plan, and we use that business plan with community consultations and boards and counselors to come up with our plan for the future. And that's basically our rule book, our guidebook for the next 3 years. We have 1 more year in that business plan. We are 24/7 coverage. We're only 12 officers, but we provide 24/7 coverage for you. There are times when, There may only be one officer working because I want to send an officer on training. I can tell you on this Sunday, I'm working a 12-hour shift, and I normally work Monday to Friday because I'm committed to the community as the chief and as our members to make your community safe. I haven't been able to get out to the community as much as I'd like to, but that is my plan, to get out, meet with all the kids, meet with all the business owners. But what I have been able to do is I've established, and starting in February, the officers go to all the community events. They go to Winkles, go to the hospital. They go wherever they can, and then they interact with people. So in the month of February, our service of 12 members interacted with 1,455 people in the month. And we spent 31.4 hours on patrol in the community. In the month of March, we interacted with 1,263 people over 37.8 hours. So that's something that you probably don't know we do because you may not see us all the time. But that's something we're dedicated to providing to the community, being out there. And if people have concerns, hopefully they're comfortable enough to come up and talk to us. That's the whole goal. I'm looking forward to getting out with the kids in the summer months. I think we're past winter, but not really sure yet. And interact with the kids as well. Some of our policing responsibilities involve the youth initiative, the DARE program. The officers here could probably describe the DARE program better, but it's reaching out to the kids, educating the kids, and getting them ready to be good community representatives. In policing, I call them the 3 E's. There's education, environmental situations, and the third is enforcement. Enforcement doesn't solve everything. Educating and having the proper environment is the better way to go. We follow community safety and well-being. We believe in it, and that's something that's been adopted by the province. Public education awareness, basically what I was just talking about. We do bylaw enforcement for this community right now. We're involved in criminal and provincial investigations, and we're highly engaged with your emergency preparedness, making your community safer. When it comes to court security and prisoner monitoring, the dispatchers monitor the prisoners that are in the cells. And the police station acts as the courthouse's facility when people bring individuals into our community, including the OPP, including Sagamore, including other services. Because we have the courthouse, our police service works as the holding facility for the courts because it's close. There is no holding facility within the courts, and so that's another thing we do. Of course, we follow health and safety principles, and we believe in civilian oversight. It's out there. We want the community to understand, and we want to be able to articulate why we did things. And that is basically your service in review. Thank you for the time.
Congratulations, Chief. It's not always easy to stand up and make a presentation like that. And you did it with such calm and such ease. And you also presented a series of other facts that are available to you and available to council in making decisions such as this. So congratulations on providing some, but largely balanced. I think that detected a note of bias in there, but virtually and largely balanced. Ed, would you like to come and say a couple of words?
I'll just stand right here. Can everyone hear me? I don't really have a presentation here. I just want to explain my role here. My name is Ed Stortz. I'm a constable at the Espanola Police Service. I've been here for 13 years. I wasn't born here. I was born in the stew, but it's been an absolute pleasure to be serving your community, in which I consider my community now. So thank you for that. It's right to the chase. What's the score?
1-1.
1-1. Okay, someone's monitoring it. Thank you so much for giving up your hockey night for coming out. It shows how much you care about the community. It's also 2-2 for the Jays and the Yankees, just so you know. I'm president of the Police Association. I represent 11 uniformed officers. I don't represent the chief. He's on his own. I represent 4 full-time civilian dispatchers, and I represent 3 part-time civilian dispatchers. They are part of our association. They are part of this community. So I just want you to know that if there's any questions that are directed to that part of it, I'll be trying to field them. So again, thanks for the opportunity to come and speak, and thanks for coming.
I'm not hijacking your presentation, but I am going to get the water.
I think that was mine, Chief. Anyway, thank you very much for those presentations. And now it's your turn. Given the nature of this room, and some people are softer spoken than others, not everybody can do as well as Ed did in terms of speaking. We have a microphone out here, and I believe it's turned on. As long as you get close to the microphone, we can hear, everybody in the room can hear what you're saying, as can the people who are listening at home or elsewhere, somewhere in the world, on live streaming. So, the other question of anybody here, there's some questions I'm sure that came out from the Chief's presentation that you may wish to direct to the OPP, or you may have a question of Cynthia. Sir, go right ahead. If you wouldn't mind giving your name.
Yes, my name is Gary Plackett. I'm resident of Espanola for many years.
A little closer, please, Gary.
A little closer?
Yeah.
As I say, I've been a resident of Espanola for a number of years. I've always felt that we've had good police services. I've appreciated the people that I've dealt with over the years, which I hope not in a professional capacity, but one thing I'm just trying to, we had a lot of numbers at the beginning of this presentation. I don't see where the savings are coming from. It looks like with the existing police service and the OPP, if it comes in, will be about the same number of equivalents. Where are we seeing the savings? Where is it coming from? Are we somehow sharing officers off the Highway 17 corridor? Are they being counted in here so that they're doing double duty? Where is this $500,000 a year savings coming from?
Probably a fair question to address to Cynthia. Cynthia, could you explain where the cost reduction?
Yeah, I can try. Well, I should be able to. So during the transition contract, the first 3 years, the savings were roughly $350,000. So that's the difference of the communication center. So OPP's communication center is in North Bay. So there's some economies of scale there, I guess. And dispatch would be done at a lower cost as well. The chief's position would be replaced by 0.2 of a detachment commander. So during the year transition contract, that's where roughly about $350,000 of the savings come from. In year 4, it's a little hard to tell right now, but there's an additional $600,000 of savings there. But because the model is so different, it really, that part of it is up to OPP, I guess. I'm not sure how to answer that in the potential 4th year and beyond.
Unfortunately, I didn't get all of what you were saying because there is a bad echo here. Assuming that you are correct and where that's coming from, was the police service, Espanola Police Service, given an opportunity to find cost savings that may be equivalent to what we're seeing in savings from the OPP?
Chief, was the police service asked in the budget to attempt to pair the budget in order to compare to this? I would be surprised if that were done. That's not usually how this process is. It isn't a bargaining process. But,
I'm not going to use this. I can speak pretty loud as well, being a police officer. No, the Espanola Police Service wasn't asked to find reductions, but to find what you're seeing there is basically the dispatch center is no longer in Espanola. So that is pretty much the cost savings that you're getting. For me to reduce, I have to, because I showed you the budget, it said 90% salaries and wages, I have to reduce staff. And then I can't provide 24/7. So I couldn't do that.
It's not surprising. This is similar to others I've seen where it's a sharing of senior management not having 100% of the chief or equivalent, and also not, if you don't have your own dispatch, there's a savings as well.
But as the police chief has pointed out, there's a lot of services that the police force provide in the community because they're local, which are not included in that costing model. And we will not get that with the OPP.
But you may wish to ask the OPP that question, if there were services that...
Yeah, because you have after-hours public works, you have after-hours
Go
hydro.
ahead and ask the
Well, I
question.
can speak to the Like you have
No,
after-hours.
so the people at the back of the room can hear, sir. That's the biggest problem when people don't use the mics. The people at the back of the room don't hear because, quite frankly, there are people like me that wear hearing aids, and the mic is really essential for them.
Like with the dispatch, you know,
Sir,
they
can you
do,
use
they
the
do
mic,
a lot of
please?
other stuff also. They do the after-hours hydro.
Sir,
They
the
do
people
that.
at home can't hear you either.
What's that?
Because this is being live streamed, so people at home can't hear what you're saying. So for the benefit of everybody else, please, would you use the microphone?
I don't want to use the microphone.
Then please don't ask your question.
Well, I have
It's
a
not
right-
fair to other people.
I have a right to ask questions. I am a resident, so I pay taxes.
You can use the microphone, sir. I'm very sorry,
I
sir.
don't want
This
to use
is,
the microphone.
this is for the benefit of other people. Sir, you come to the mic.
Yes, my name is Jim Ramsey, and I too have the same type of question regarding savings. And I thank Cynthia. I've written a number of letters to Cynthia, and she's responded, and thank you very much for that. I just don't understand it. The 5 million, that is. When you're looking at the model, the OPP model, and the services you have, the police service you have, I don't think we're talking about apples and apples. We're talking about the cost. Okay. I don't believe, and I have nothing against the OPP and the police force. I just don't think they're going to give us a level of service. It's a costing model that we're looking at. The town police are available to us. They give us immediate service. I think we're going to get, no due respect, a drive-through police force. Because there's nobody going to be, from what I understand, I was at November or the last
So
meeting.
perhaps, and again, my apologies for interrupting, but rather than try and make a position, why don't you ask the OPP
That's what I'm doing.
about those questions?
I'm
Okay.
trying to get to that.
Okay, you were saying I don't think, and I think you need to ask them.
Well, it's because I don't know.
Then please put your question to them.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I finish? Thanks.
With your question, please.
Anyway, the problem I have with that is I think we're getting a cost on the reduced service. And I think that's where the money's coming from. We've got a good police force now. If we go to the costing model, we get a provincial model. We don't get a community base. Can somebody tell me that in terms of, are we talking about a costing the same type of service from the OPP that we're getting from the town police now? Are we going to get that same type of service? And what is that going to cost? For the OPP model?
Can everybody hear me? Because I have a very loud
No,
voice
you need
also.
the mic so the people at home can hear you too, because there's probably as many or more people at home.
Okay, you can hear me now. The proposal that's being put forth is to have the same officers in the town. It would be the same officers patrolling the streets, the same number of officers, because it would be a separate zone that would be permanently, those officers would be assigned in the town. Yes, there are a bigger area that the OPP does cover, but we also have other officers that cover those zones. So in a sense, we would just be taking on a new zone, which would be the town of Espanola, and we would be taking on your police officers to patrol that same zone. So there should not be a difference in service.
Sir, was that all the elements of the question that you asked, though? Were there some other elements that the chief?
Yes, that's totally different from the presentation we had last fall, where they said they couldn't dedicate officers to the town of Espanola. I understand that that's changed then, if you're going to dedicate 4 officers to the town of Espanola.
You're saying that you want the same specific body in town. There may not be the same person every single day in town, but there would be the number of officers assigned to that zone.
Yeah, I don't care if it's wearing the blue uniform. All I'm saying is the last presentation we had at the courthouse was that, I guess it was the courthouse, is that you couldn't dedicate a force to Espanola. It would be a composite. You would come in from Massey or wherever the officer might be. It wasn't a dedicated force in Espanola.
Okay. Operationally, we would be adding a new zone and adding new officers in that zone, so the complement would be the same as what you currently have.
That's a different model.
Sir. You can actually line up with the mic too. There's no problem if you choose to do that.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Erickson. I'm also one of the first responders here in 45 years in the fire department. And just as a statement, I'll make it very clear that the last 45 years, there's nothing else I can add for police force than the U.S. Police Force. You're excellent. OPP are excellent also. But my concern is on the fire ground, when we need an officer for traffic control or any kind of investigation. Right now, we're having to get in that officer there in minutes. It's a serious affair. He's there when we are. I can't see that kind of service coming from the OPP. It could be out on the highway, they might be tied somewhere else. They might be as far down as Little Current. It might be happening in Massey.
Put your question to the OPP and ask them if that same service would be available.
Would that service be available?
The short answer is, there, how's that?
So the short answer is absolutely yes. Essentially, with the 3 zones, we operate what's called an integrated delivery model. So let's call it, for example, what you're already familiar with, the Highway 17 detachment, the Little Current detachment, and your current town zone, if you will. That doesn't change. It'll be the same zones, but within that integrated service delivery model is every officer that's within that detachment there. For example, to simplify things, is the platoon structure is 4 platoons of 2 sergeants and 10 constables. So meaning, if you have the Espanola town officer, I'll call it the Espanola town zone, if they're tied up with court or calls for service, etc., the road supervisors ensures that we maintain a steady level of deployment in all zones. So meaning, we wouldn't leave 6 officers on Highway 17. Those officers, because of the integrated service delivery model, 2 or 3, while the officers are tied up in town, 2 or 3 will be relocated in town to ensure that there's an immediate response to calls for service or assisting to whatever the services that you're already accustomed to.
Okay, there are 2 more short questions.
Sure. Go right ahead.
One of the other questions is that our police officers now presently live in town, they shop in town, they carry on with the things that we have going on in town. I can't expect the OPP to do that because it could be from various locations. I guess that's not a question, it's a statement. The other thing, the last point I'd like to make is I understand that our savings are built on models that are coming up in 5 years and beyond. We all know what government, it doesn't matter what government it is, our branch of government has been cutting back so much in the last 10 or 15 years that I dread to see what's coming in 5 years. So that model can be guaranteed.
And that's the question, I think, of the OPP. What the current billing model, how long is it guaranteed for? And are there any changes anticipated over the next 5 years or longer? Is there an answer to that?
The current model is relatively new. It was just introduced in 2015. The model that we previously had was in place for over 20 years. We were asked to change the previous model by the Auditor General and by the AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So there was a lot of extensive research done in changing the billing model. It took over 3 years with that engagement, and so the model is now relatively new. It's been in place for 3 years, and there's no anticipated change in the near future.
Thank you. Can't always predict politics at the provincial level, but the intention is it stays for a while. Sir, please.
Yes, my name is Gary. First, I have 2 questions directed to the OPP, if you don't mind. We have 11 police officers, plus the chief. I've read some of accounts, and most accounts that I've read, that when the police OPP are taken over, they do not absorb all of our town police. Can you guarantee us that you will absorb and keep in our municipality the 11 police officers that we currently have? That's part 1 of my question. Part 2 of my question is periodically you read in the paper about a sunshine list. And if there's a police officer on it, for some reason everybody gets very upset because they make over $100,000 a year for all the hours that they put in, for all the work that they do. What percentage of your officers make over $100,000 a year?
Good questions.
Okay, so let me first address the first one about the officers. We're unable to guarantee anything in relation to officers. However, what we have is what's called a career development bureau. So every officer who chooses to apply, because they don't have to apply, will go through a process with the career development bureau. And what happens there is there's a background investigation. Sorry. If something comes out in the background investigation, they may require some further interviews at that point. However, the OPP will hire any officer in good standing.
And the second question with respect to the percentage that earning over 100,000.
Oh, yeah. So we're unable to comment on how many officers would be making over $100,000. We don't have a process to calculate that.
You don't want to answer that. You just don't want to answer that.
We don't know.
You can go to the provincial website, but the challenge is you don't know how many officers there are in total, so you don't know the percentage. That's the question. Sir.
Thanks. Hello. Denis Bois. First of all, thanks to Cynthia for the report. I found it very, just going over it as you were presenting it there. From what I can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's the Espanola zone that's been created. Staffing state remains the same. Is that correct?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Well, it stays the same. It's the same. Basically, just to elaborate a little bit on Kelly's answers, the number of officers remains the same. The number of positions, the head count stays the same.
Yeah. So, at first glance, staffing stays the same. We save lots of money over a 10-year period. It's great. But then there's the first, your summary slide, Cynthia. The last sentence, the last phrase says that year 4, cost reductions become a reduction of FTEs. So to me, that's a reduction of headcount. So is this where we start losing, when the staffing starts to thin out? Because it's a rather innocuous statement, but it seems to have a lot of weight.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting line. It caught my eye too. Cynthia, can you explain what you meant by that, or what you were trying to flag?
Okay, yeah. So my point was, because we have to enter into a 3-year transition contract, and then in year 4 we switch over to the billing model. So there are significant savings in year 4, and I was just kind of commenting that it's kind of unknown from my perspective where those savings are going to come from. But in general, no police costs 90% are salaries and benefits. I would assume that some of those full-time equivalents might get reallocated or something.
Therefore, I'll redirect my question into the OPP reps. Is traditionally when a community has switched over to the OPP service, has there been, in general, a reduction of headcount in terms of? 'Cause at the moment, I'm very pleased with the service we're getting from the Esplanade Police Service. Well covered, great response time. But what concerns me is that with the reduction of headcount means reduction of services.
Traditionally, in the past, contracts with the OPP have been FTE contracts, which means it's based on the number of persons. Full-time equivalents is what FTE stands for, and that's how the old model was presented, and that's what the transition contract is in. We were asked to change from that model and not to bill on FTEs because they felt there were disparities in that model. So the new billing model that comes into effect in year 4 is not based on FTEs. It's based on base services, which is the ability to have police available with all their resources 7/24. And the other portion is based on the calls for service, where it's proportionate to the amount of calls you have in your area. So the more calls for service that a certain community would have, like a larger community, they would pay more because they have more calls for service, and a smaller community with fewer calls for service would pay less. So in year 4, there is no commitment to the FTE count, but there's no anticipation of reducing the staff either.
Okay, but the options there depending on the calls.
It would be dependent on the needs of the community.
Okay, I have another question.
Could go down, could stay the same. Could go up, could go down, could stay the same?
That's correct. It could go up, it could go down, it could stay the same, depending on the needs of the community.
Okay, thanks. I have one other question. And closes the loop on this gentleman's question or statement that he was trying to make. Chief Zimmerman listed all of the community involvement that the police services are involved with within the community. It's great. Do typically the OPP, are they as involved with the communities? I'm not familiar with what services that the OPP provide within a community like this.
Again, the short answer to your question is absolutely yes. We maintain the same services. We are engaged with the same community partners. We employ the Ontario Mobilization of Engagement with all of our stakeholders in the community, whether it be mental health, drug and alcohol, programs in our school, all of those same programs we maintain, and we also deliver those programs along with our community partners, victim services, to name one, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. While we're waiting for the next question, there's another way of phrasing that question. How long does a typical constable stay with a particular detachment? Is there a lot of turnover? Because I think that helps address the question too. Or are people relatively these? I mean, at one time when I was young, any friends I had, they would move quite frequently. It became so costly to move an OPP officer. I think the province decided they weren't going to do that anymore. What's the current state of affairs in terms of mobility?
I mean, honestly, from one end of the province to the next, it varies. But in my experience, this is my 30th year with the OPP, a lot of it within the municipal setting. For example, for those that don't know, I'm also the detachment commander in East Algoma, which represents Elliott Lake and Blind River area. And I can tell you that there are officers, for example, Elliott Lake and Blind River have essentially been there their entire career. East Algoma, just to clarify a bit, is also identified what we call a duration posting, meaning after 5 years, officers have a choice or an option of their own, whether or not they want to transfer or remain. And for the most part, most remain.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Owen Copeland. My question is to the OPP. Why do we need a satellite station camera? Are we going to get it a mile away?
And if you could repeat the question too, so you go ahead.
So just
so I understand your question clearly, you're asking why would we be maintaining the two buildings? Yes. The short answer, it's simple logistics. For the total number of officers that we would have, should the OPP amalgamate with your local service, physical structure, not every officer, not every staff or the head counts, as it was brought up earlier, will not fit in one single building. So if we were to bring all of our current highway officers, for example, or staffing, we would not all fit in the town office, vice versa, all of the town. So basically, our proposal is to maintain the two buildings. Although they're physically two buildings, it's part of all the same operations. So, and both buildings also would be open Monday to Friday to the public, regular business hours, just as it's been.
Thank you. Sir, rather than bend over, I'm going to ask you to lift the mic up. Sorry about that. Lift the whole thing.
Pat Parker, been living in Espanola for 26 years. We heard during the presentation that the average response time is about 8 minutes. There must be faster ones and there must be longer ones. I'm particularly interested in how long it would take your officers to respond when someone at the hospital emergency department pushes the panic button, let's say 2 a.m. on a Saturday night.
So, as we mentioned earlier, Espanola, the town, essentially would remain as a own separate dedicated zone should the OPP be engaged. Meaning that there will always be an officer in that same zone as you're currently enjoying now. So I can't predict what the response time would be, but I can tell you that we would be maintaining a presence dedicated to the zone.
What would be the longest possible time to respond?
I honestly, I really can't answer that because there's just way too many variables in that. All I can tell you is that we would be maintaining a constant police presence in the current zone that you have now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please. Sir?
My name is Johnny Boyd. If I understand everything, look at the numbers in that, basically 93% of the cost is for the officers. The other 7% is variable cost and for maintenance with buildings, police equipment, stuff like that. So, and then I'm just like, if I understand that correctly, somebody can tell me if I'm wrong. Then the other thing is we're going to spend $450,000 upgrading the building that already houses our officers that are doing their job. That seems like a fair amount of money. And then the other thing that comes from that is if we're going to upgrade, because I know the island supposedly is going to be building a new OPP station. So what's to say that after 3 years from now, when our contract's up, they decide that they need a new building down on the highway? Will we be able to look for that money?
Please.
The only way that if the OPP decided they needed a larger building, then there's a possibility it would be a cost-sharing venture. The municipality or the town of Espanola is responsible for providing accommodations. So if we had adequate accommodations here in the town with the service that you had, then there would be no cost. If we didn't have an office here in the town, and the town of Espanola was using our accommodations out on the highway, then there's a possibility that there could be a cost to that.
Okay, and then we're basically basing our savings on the first 3 years, roughly. And if I read the numbers right there too, we're going to save roughly $900,000 in 3 years. That doesn't cover the $2 million it's going to cost us to flip over. I can't see how you're going to make up that $1.1 million in 1 more year before we start saving money. And there's no guarantee because if it's only a 3-year contract and then we go to new rules, who's to say that those prices that we're estimating aren't going to be a lot higher than what we're showing right now? When you mentioned the call numbers, I know on the highway, we have one person out there that according to the OPP is constantly calling the police about certain things. And I know people in town know who this person is because they have the parking on the shoulder and all that stuff. I actually got a notice from that from the OPP. And I was told by the OPP, this guy's calling every day. So that means a call you have to respond to. So if we start getting nuisance calls like that, we're going to pay for those?
It depends. It depends on the type of call that's being placed, and this wouldn't be in effect until the 4th year, but there are 2 categories of calls. There's sort of proactive calls and reactive calls. The reactive calls are billable, the proactive calls are not.
Okay, so if I got my facts straight, first 3 years would be about guaranteed this is what the cost is going to be because it costs us $2 million to flip over. After that 3 years, no one can say what our costs are going to be. We're renting into a contract that's only 3 years long, which can change a lot of things pretty fast. Why can't the OPP offer a contract that's 10 years long that says this is what our cost is going to be?
It's in your best interest to switch over to the billing model and to be in that model, which comes in year 4, because it's not tied to the FTE and the salary dollars. It's tied to the level of service that you're getting in your community. And we have found that in most situations in small towns like this, they benefit from the billing model with the shared services. The OPP would be in the area, whether Espanola Police Service was here or not, as we are now. We have the detachment in Manitoulin and the satellite office out on the highway. And should you choose to keep your own police service, we're still going to have those offices there. It's because we're already in the community that it's based on the economies of scale that we can save the money for the town.
Okay, so my understanding is we're going to save money in the first 3 years, roughly $900,000. $1.1 million is not a cost savings that we can count on, and that things could change rapidly in the future.
So just to clarify, maybe I didn't understand your comment, but for the first 3 years, it was about 300 and 337 to 350,000 per year. So yes, at the end of the 3-year transition period, we were still projected to be about $1 million out of pocket. But in year 4, when we do transfer to this billing model and there's a more of a sharing of costs, that's when we're going to increase the savings as per the projections. And they are just projections, so it's all based on estimates and based on the information available to us at this time. So did I fully answer all
I
that?
understand that. I just want to make sure I got everything straight. We're going to save roughly $900,000 to $990,000 for 3 years. After that, in 1 year, we're going to save $1 million. I have a hard time justifying those numbers. And then to say that, then it's going to be $1 million every year. My understanding of the whole presentation was given tonight is our savings are going to come from shared services, pretty much.
I don't know if anybody wants to comment.
And in year 4 and afterwards, from a change in the provincially mandated billing model, as opposed to an FTE-based model. I appreciate it. It's convoluted, and you're doing 3 years of let's call them oranges, and then.
Yeah. I understand that we have this model we're going to have to go by, and I fully understand that the government says you're going to do it. But the only guarantee we have is we're going to save less than $1 million in 3 years. After that, everything else is just conjecture.
Good. Thank you. Next question, ma'am.
I was wondering if you can explain why we need to renovate our current station to accommodate the OPP, because it currently serves our officers now. And my other part of that question is there any cost of that renovation going towards renovating the station in McCarran?
Anyone who was care to answer that? Is that the $450,000 figure? So where's it come from and what's it go to?
So we were given an estimate on those costs for OPP, and it didn't include certain things. the total estimate we were provided was $421,000, and then there was still a little bit of work to decommission ourselselves, and there was one other item. So that's where the $450,000 came from. Approximately $125,000 of that is for the highway location, and the rest is for our local office.
Okay, so we are decommissioning ourselves, and they're currently being used to house people that need to go to court. Why would we be decommissioning them?
Currently, the cells do not meet the adequacy standards for the provincial standards, so we would not utilize them until they were up to standard.
So the renovation cost will be to upgrade some of the cells.
The cost upgrades are to bring the Espanola facility up to the standards that the detachment facility guidelines are at, and those standards are partly legislated and they're partly also for the security and the safety of the people working at the detachment. And there are guidelines that we have to follow for the upfitting of the station.
I think it's highly unfair to charge the residents of Espanola to modify the station at Cara. My next question is based on switching to the calls for service. We are a community center, and we have services for a lot of outstanding or other communities outside of our area. So we have a local high school that has people from roughly 7 communities that come. So a lot of the calls for service that our current police have are in our community for residents that don't belong to our community. Could we turn around and build those other communities if we are requiring the OPP to respond to that? Currently, our police services are being paid, they're on shift, so they respond as part of the community. But we're now going to be subsidizing a lot of costs for other communities by going to the OPP model.
Who'd like to address that one?
Okay, I can try. So I think, if I understand your question, is that a lot of the calls for service are coming from residents outside of our community.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah, hospital calls.
And if we were in the OPP billing model, we would be getting charged for those calls for service.
Of course we will.
And so, I mean, as a comparison, all I can say is that, you know, the town is currently costing or paying for those services now, and we have no mechanism to bill that. Believe me, I'd like to.
I have another question, and it was based on the cost per household. Your best guess saying that our cost per household once we switch to the OPP billing model would be about $572 per household. And we looked at similar communities, and similar communities had $632 per household as the highest. At $572, we are very close to that, and that has not even factored in looking at any particular enhancements that we want. So by saying that it's going to be roughly the same or it's in line, I think that we're not really in line when we're looking at other communities. I think we're actually on the high side if we're starting out close to the top without having the extra enhancements.
And the reason for that is because we are a full service hub, more or less. Our community has all the services of bigger communities, so we do have higher calls for service. When I looked at those properties, there are 6 communities that are currently Section 10 communities. Some of them, for example, like Blind River, is a smaller community but has a similar number of properties. So that was one of those communities that was in the analysis. Cochrane was probably the closest to our, in consideration of the amenities that we have. So I forget what they were, but they were closer to what our costs would be under that model.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, and then I'll step away from the mic while I continue to think. Can the OPP officers tell me what the last contract increase was for salaried officers? What was the percentage increase in salary for the officers of the last contract with the provincial government?
contracts usually cover several years, if I remember correctly. Remember what the adjustment was in the last year of the last contract?
I know that the most recent increase was 1.75% for this year. And I believe it was a contract that was negotiated over 3 years, and I don't recall it off the top of my head, but I do have it on my computer and I could get it for you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. And is it currently the OPP's policy to, if the contract is increased by that amount, turn around and direct bill that to the communities that they serve? And just automatically up the cost based on the contracts?
Can you repeat that question, please?
So if there's a large percentage increase in salary for officers, does that automatically up the cost of all of the billings that get done for the calls for service?
Not for the calls for service, but for the base portion of the costs in the billing model, because they're based on actual salary dollars.
Is that 100% transferable? If that cost 100% transferable to communities?
I would say yes.
Thank you.
Sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Kelly, firefighter for 16 years in this community. First off, I'd like to thank the officers for doing an amazing job. I have a couple of questions. Cynthia, in your presentation, you had 0.2 of a chief. What is 0.2 of a chief? How does that relate to a full-time chief? What does he do?
Okay, that's not really a question for me. That was in the proposal, so it's 0.2 of a detachment commander.
It basically means that the detachment commander would not be dedicated to the town of Espanola 100% of the time, but 20% of the time. Or it could mean you only get his right hand and his right elbow. But
fair enough. Also, with our dispatch, if we switch to OPP, we're going to lose our dispatch. That's going to come to a cost to our community for dispatching our fire. We're also losing revenue from contracting it out to Mass and South Springs River, etc. And that being said, if we do switch, how many jobs lost?
There's, I believe, the 4 full-time and the 3 part-time dispatchers.
And in terms of who would actually be doing the dispatching under the new system and who would pay, was that factored into the analysis? Yeah. I think that's your question too, isn't it?
Yeah, so there are costs already built into our budget for that, but it hasn't really been determined who would do that. I guess we'd have to go through the RFP process to see who's interested in doing our dispatch. We did have a price from a company in February, and that's what we used.
It would still be a cost added on top of switching.
Well, it is included in the numbers.
One more question. A couple of years ago, we had a major event downtown, a big fire. Lots of OPP officers on duty, on the scene. If we had another event like that, is that an extra, and at what cost to the town?
No, that wouldn't be an extra cost. The costs that have been projected, normally, if you're in the first 3 years of the transition contract, it's all incorporated. If it was after, in year 4, when you're in the billing model, it would be considered as one call for service, and that's all, regardless of how many officers or what resources were deployed to it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Terrence Smith.
We'll get our techie to help you. Thank you.
Cynthia, just on the dispatching, you've indicated in your numbers that a significant portion of the cost saving was the 7 people, members of our community, who are going to lose their jobs. And that work does need to be assigned somewhere else. So we're going to be sending that money out of the community. Can you give us an idea how much money that is?
In the OPP quotation, there is a charge for the communication center. I don't have it right in front of me.
Sorry, it's not the OPP cost of dispatch engines. It's what we have to replace for our fire and hydro.
Okay, the cost, it was, I think based on a per person amount, it was relatively small. So just for dispatching fire, the cost, I know we have two different amounts in our budget for that. One is about $25,000 comes to mind for dispatching those services. I would have to confirm that, and I would definitely make that available at the next council meeting. I'll have to confirm that.
But you're making numbers available to us that represent cost savings. And I think it's important that you actually factor in what we also have to pay in addition. And that needs to be noted up front so it's clear. The second thing, we are going to be doing some modification to the OPP station out on the highway, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so going forward, if this goes through, are we responsible for the maintenance of that building?
No.
Okay. So the existing building in town would continue to maintain the level of policing services that you've indicated, and I know that you're not doing full-time equivalents anymore, but we're still looking at roughly the same number of officers, one way or the other. I find it difficult to imagine that currently the costing model does not pick up 52% of the calls. I find it incredible that the OPP would not be making some sort of move going forward to recoup some of that cost. However, if in fact that's the case, we will be paying that additional cost for those 12 officers through the provincial offers anyway, and that's also tax dollars that are being spent on those additional 12 officers, whether it's coming provincially or from municipal. Is that incorrect in some way?
Is that a comment that you can comment on? It really wasn't quite in the form of the question.
The police officers for OPP do not make a significant amount less than our municipal police, do they, on a salary or hourly basis?
I don't know the salary of a police officer.
I believe that the salaries were very comparable on the most part. I mean, there were differences in the, depending on the rank and so on. I think your question is that we're paying for 12 officers now, and even after 4 years, if we still have 12, after the fourth year, we're either paying through the OPP billing model or it becomes part of our provincial tax bill. Is that what you're asking?
If the OPP are increasing their manpower by 12 officers, somehow we are going to be paying for that.
Yes. That's in your contract with them.
With the contract, yes, because this initial contract is an FTE contract based on the number of officers.
Okay.
Next, please, sir.
Thank you. My name is Bill Newton. First of all, I'd like to thank Council for finally giving us the opportunity to come forward here and voice our opinions and ask the questions. So opinions seem to be frowned upon. I'd like to hear our opinion. I want to say, too, that in the strongest terms, I oppose any change. I have a feeling from comments tonight that most of the people here agree. I oppose any change to our current police. Our officers do a good job.
You're very clear. You had a question for these people. That's very clear. Thank you.
I have two questions. I think people should be able to make a statement. Sorry, you can't hear me. Need to stand closer. Back in about January, I emailed this council with 5 questions. the actual cost of the upgrade to the current facility to meet OPP requirements. This is back in January. She came back to me, there has been information previously circulated regarding the potential cost of a new building. Fully equipped police station, to house our officers, and the highway officers would be about $6.9 million. To renovate the current facility, this is January, these are your comments, $4.3 million. How is it possible from January to now to knock $3.5 million off a renovation? That makes me nervous. There's something wrong here.
So I might have to go back and read that again, because there was definitely, or maybe I made a mistake in how I worded that. So back probably before January, there was still discussion that we would most likely have to build a new building, and the cost would have been the $6.9 million based on the square footage and so on, and then there would have been a provincial portion that could be leased back to the OPP. That was the higher number. The lower number was if we were to provide a base, that was for a fully equipped police station. The lower number was if we were just to provide the base of the building, and then the OPP was to complete that. So they would have been paying the extra $2 million to make it up to their standards, and then our lease revenue coming back to us would have been less. So I don't think we ever had a cost to renovate the existing station at that time, because we were under the understanding that it wasn't going to be adequate.
Yes, but at the time, in January, at the information session you held, this was the information that came across. Renovate the current building, $4.3 million. To build a new one, which maybe we don't have to do now, I don't know. Over $6 million. That's a huge change. I don't understand that. How would you make such a big difference?
So the cost for the $4 million, it was never to renovate the existing station. That's to provide another new build, but to provide not a completed station.
So what would be in that $6 million building?
So that would be a full 15,000 square foot police station, I believe, to be located within the town of Espanola. And it was estimated at the time that the OPP would lease maybe 2/3 of that back. But I mean, that was a very expensive option, and I don't think that council wanted to consider a new building at that time. And then when we got the proposal in September, it was for the use of the existing 2 facilities to make it work without a new build required.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about building a new building. Right? Okay.
Good question.
Sorry?
It's a good question.
The other thing, I hear a lot of, this is an estimate. I don't know. I guess. I think. Why can't you give us concrete figures? In 2016, off our town website, the actual hard figures for leasing in Espanola, $2.2 million. The estimate from the police, OPP, we're nearly the same thing. Where is the savings? This question is already asked. Where is the savings? And that's a 2-part question. You're telling us you're going to save $1 million a year. That's almost 50%. That's impossible. Explain that to me.
So those savings don't materialize till year 4 when we do.
I don't care if it's year 10. Just tell me how you save 50% of money.
So the first 3 years, the savings of about $350,000 is that you would be saving roughly 80% of a full-time police chief's time and wages, benefits. And then the difference is also dispatch would be contracted out, and there would be significant savings between those 2 areas in the first 3 years. That's where roughly $350,000 comes from. In year 4, when we transfer to the billing model, it's a formula. I've worked the numbers several different ways. KPMG's reviewed them. There's an additional savings there of about $600,000. So I can't tell you exactly where that comes from. I'm just telling you this is based on the information I have at the time.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add that those savings in year 4 come from the change of the billing style, as opposed to being an FTE-based model, going to the base calls for service model, is where those savings come from.
Thank you very much. I still want to, still comes down to the bottom line. To me, I don't care if it's point to the detachment commander and 0.5 or something else. I want to know the bottom line. How much is it going to cost the taxpayers of Espanola? Just try to answer. I just cannot understand the 50% saving. I just can't see that happening. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, I just have a statement that I'd like to address to council.
If you can do it very quickly, that's fine.
Absolutely,
Because
very, very quickly.
Council,
I gotta take my glasses off to read.
if I just might, in terms of anybody else that wishes to make a lengthy statement to council, you can appear before council. This has been confirmed to me, as a delegation, if you wish, with a prepared statement that you would submit in advance and then speak to it at the council meeting, in terms of if you wish to describe your position. So that's short. And normal delegations are up to 3 to 5 minutes, I suspect. So if you can keep it under that, that would be great.
Absolutely.
We've got a couple people behind you. So
Yep, no problem. Thank you very much. So my name is Dean Riggs. I am an educator at Espanola High School for the last 26 years. And presently the Espanola Police Department is at our school every single week. And it's not for the reasons that everybody thinks. They are at our school for a number of reasons. And they are an integral part of educating our students on the dangers of drinking and driving, drugs, and most recently the dangers of social media. Since our biannual presentation by the Espanola Police Department, our instances of harassment through social media have decreased dramatically. Number 2, the Espanola Police are at our school because they want to walk around and engage our students and making those wonderful community connections. And lastly, the police are at our school for enforcement of infractions by our students. When we need an officer for anything, whether it's serious or something, just a clarification of something, our police force that we currently have is at our building in minutes. If you are elected officials decided over to OPP, I feel that you'll be doing a disservice to the students of our school and to our school communities. And I'd like for you to carefully think about the ramifications of that decision, because if something ever happens and we have a delayed response, it's forever going to be on your conscience. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jill Beer again. I have a question about the role of a community police board. Currently, we have members of our community now that sit with our police board and not direct the police board, but they discuss the issues that come up. The police does have its own autonomy to make decisions in terms of how they serve the community, but the community has a say and participation in that. How does that work with the OPP?
So I'm making the assumption you're talking about the Police Services Board. So it's with the Ontario Provincial Police, the detachment commander is accountable to the Police Services Board just as the municipal police chief would. The detachment commander meets with the Police Services Board, and in consultation with the Police Services Board, both the detachment commander and the board essentially guide direction that the community or the community needs are. And we direct our resources accordingly, according to what the board wishes are as well.
Currently, our dispatchers, so I'm going to switch to a different question. Currently, our dispatchers do stuff other than just dispatching. I'm wondering if our police chief could explain to the community some of the other roles that they do.
Thanks for the question. They do a number of things, and I'm probably going to forget some of them. That's how many things they do. They respond to the front counter, so people can come 24 hours, 7 days a week, and they respond to the people that come in at the front counter and provide them assistance. They answer phone calls. They are the 911 PSAP center, so they answer phone calls, just general calls. They answer for police, fire, and EMS, and transition those down. They also do our freedom of information. They do records checks. We do officer dictation, so the officers might not necessarily type their reports, but they dictate the reports, and the dispatcher is the person that types those reports. They're involved with our court brief preparation. They're active on our health and safety committee. They do the health and safety committee checks. They're involved with emergency preparedness. They do scribing for incidents that take place.
I think you can achieve.
Yeah, there's a ton. If I had my list with me, I could go through them all, but there's a lot.
Do the people behind the counter or dispatch ever have to deal with people that come in after community hours or after office hours that are in crisis and need immediate assistance?
100% that does happen. They are the first line of defense. Either it's on the phone or it's a person walking in to help the individuals get the assistance they need with the police officers. So yes, they come in. One thing I forgot is they do monitor prisoners as well. So if they're in distress, they don't go back, but they're monitoring to make sure that they're okay.
Okay, so I'm going to turn that over to the OPP. How do you respond to somebody that's walking into the office in crisis when you're really open during business hours?
So, of course, the OPP provides a 24/7 service as well. However, our detachment administrative clerks are dedicated detachment administrative clerks, and they work during business hours. Anything after hours, you may have noticed if you've ever been to one of our OPP detachments, at every door there is an emergency phone that the moment you pick it up, there is a dispatcher that immediately answers you. And if there's an occurrence, it's an officer that responds to those occurrences, not a civilian.
Okay, I've had the unfortunate pleasure of having to pick up one of your telephones. I actually do prefer the face-to-face service, I'll say. I also work full-time, so I would have difficulty getting into the police office during regular business hours. Can you explain what regular business hours are? Because there's a lot of us that work every day full-time, Monday to Friday.
So the typical business hours, like any business, it's 8 to 4, Monday to Friday.
Well, I won't be seeing you very much then. I have a question about the number of full-time equivalent officers when we move to that model. We are going to have a base model and then we can pay for enhancements. There's never been any description of what base model service actually is and what types of enhancements we may choose to purchase.
So first off, let me just say that enhancements are not necessary. They're just on top of any services that are provided by the OPP. So base services, according to the model, are your proactive. So they're your crime prevention, law enforcement, assistance to victims, public order, and emergency response. So that is also your salary and benefits. So that's what your base services is. So pretty much what it is to say that there is an officer there if you need one.
Given the current contract relationships in the costing model, are there any municipalities that are purchasing enhancements from you now?
Yes, there are.
What might some of those be?
So traffic sergeant, school officers.
Just to clarify on the school officers, we do provide community service officers and school resource officers also at no cost. An enhancement is when you want dedicated full-time commitment to one particular function. So we have some communities that want a specific traffic sergeant that's doing nothing but traffic in their community, but that doesn't exclude the regular officers from doing those jobs also.
I still agree with the earlier gentleman. He says, I don't understand how we can save half of our police costs when we move to this full-time, or to this calls for service model. At what point in time do we lose officers? Because as you said, approximately 90% of the cost comes from salary of officers. And to save $1 million a year, we are going to be losing officers. We have to. We can't save that amount of money if 90% comes from cost of salaries.
The way that the billing models is structured, like we said, it's not based on FTEs. It's a recovery model. So at the beginning of the year, based on the data that we have, we've collected over the previous years, we can tell how many officers we have in the province that are doing municipal work, and our recovery model is based on the salary of those officers that are doing municipal work as opposed to provincial work, and that's how our costs are allocated. So what's happening is you're only paying a portion for and that cost for the officers is distributed as a per property cost, and the per property cost for that base service is the same for every municipality in the province.
What they can't tell you is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario bargained really hard on behalf of small urban municipalities for a new costing model that in effect shifted some of the cost away from small and medium-sized urban municipalities to rural municipalities that didn't have high demands for service but had lots of households, particularly those with a lot of seasonal residents in them. Now, they may disagree with this, but that's generally what happened. They still need the same amount of money to run the OPP, and the new model shifts it away from certain types and sizes of municipalities over to others. That's basically the difference.
One last question, and it has to do with the comment earlier about some of the jobs that our communications officers do. One of the things that they do is they will take notes and type up reports based on dictations from our officers, so that our officers can be out in the community. Under the OPP model, does anybody do that, or does the officers have to sit there and hunting back at the keyboards and not be in the community?
The OPP does have a number of efficiencies to ensure that we keep our officers on the front line, and we do have what's called civilian data entry. So it's essentially, as you described, the officers do dictate their reports in the OPP as well. We also have what we call field or support units that essentially frontline support units that are essentially officers that are not necessarily in the front line, but that can handle non-urgent calls, freeing up those that are in the front line to be available for urgent calls or community engagement programs.
Thank you very much. I do support your local police. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hello, I have a few questions.
If you can give that a tone down, just so we catch it. Thank you. He needs another area.
I have a few questions for the OPP. My first question is, I've been hearing some confliction between when you're seeing how many police officers are going to be in the town at once. Sometimes there's one officer, and then Ms. Townsend presented that there was always going to be two. So currently during the day, we have at least 2 officers working in the town, and then at night time we always have 2. Will that still occur at all times?
Yes. Yes, the short answer to that is yes. So for example, when you look at the proposed structure, the Manitoulin and Espanola detachment, you will have access to 49 constables. So those 49 officers are in the 3 zones that was mentioned up. You have what we would typically, or what you typically know as the Highway 17 detachment, the Manitoulin detachment zone, and now we're also including the town of Espanola zone. So when you have, so this is where we're coming up with, out of those 49 officers, it's an integrated service delivery model, meaning also that our platoon structures, as I mentioned earlier, are 12. So each individual platoon will have 2 frontline supervisors. Out of the officers, 6 will be dedicated to the, and we're talking about 1 shift, 1 zone. We're talking about 6 that will be dedicated to the Espanola zone. So
Current Espanola Police Service, you're telling there's 6 officers on a day that are going to be policing this zone, current zone of the Espanola Police. Not the other zones, not the 17.
So,
I just want to answer if there's
so-
going to be 2 officers working during the day at all times and 2 at night, which is the current model.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, does the zone still consist of, the town of Espanola has blue markers everywhere that depict the zone of the current Espanola Police Services? Is that still the same current zone, or is it a different zone?
It's essentially the zone that we've identified to be the town zone, if you will, is the exact same boundaries that are in existence today.
It's going to stay the exact same.
Exact same.
Okay. My third question is, what is good standing mean? And you want a complete definition of that for your officers. So this lady in the middle, she said that you take sub-officers if they're in good standing. What is the definition of good standing?
So that's a good question, and I know this is a big concern for officers. I don't in front of me have a definition for good standing. However, what I can tell you is...
please don't use that word, that statement, if you don't have a definition for it.
So what I can tell you is that officers do go through our career development bureau. Okay?
I
So
understand
they do
that,
have
but
a
you
process.
said good standing. You already stated that already. I wanted, what is good standing? You already said before that you would go through something
Please
that,
let her
what is
describe
that
the
good
process.
standing?
The definition for
A good standing officer.
a good standing officer is that they can successfully pass the background and security check through our career development bureau.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, when you presented the numbers on the PowerPoint presentation, it said there would be enhancement for bylaws. So currently, our Espanola police officers make connections with Espanola Hydro and Public Works to ensure that, for example, in the wintertime, that our roads are clear so that they can plow the highways. And what I'm understanding is that those connections would just exist. So one of the things I like about living in Espanola is that our roads are always clear, and that's because there's good communications with Public Works and the police and hydro and stuff like that. And I understand that you're saying that we have to pay for those services now. Based on you said it was going to
No, that's not true. The bylaw enforcement officer, the OPP will do bylaw enforcement, but they will not do 100% of your bylaw enforcement. We will not enforce building bylaws or animal control bylaws, and I'm not quite sure if your current police officers do that now. But we will do bylaw enforcement. It's negotiated between the Police Services Board and the detachment commander. There is no extra cost for that. However, it's more efficient for the town of Espanola to have a bylaw officer to do the bylaws than it is to have a police officer do them.
Let me see if I can help you with your question, because I think it wasn't answered. The question, I think what you're looking at is the police officers being 24/7, particularly at night, will provide some on-the-ground advice with respect to hydro problems or road maintenance problems, should they come across them?
And that's the integrated community model that makes us more great.
What,
And I
and
feel like
that,
that you're saying
that's not
that.
bylaw enforcement, that's actually patrolling. Who provides your night patrol for your road service, Cynthia? You know, and how do you do it?
If someone parks on the street, you know, I'm sure that the plowers, they call the Espanola Police Service to ensure that the car is moved, so our roads are always clear. With that, same level of service happening.
Yes, essentially, we work with all community partners, just as the current agency does. So, for example, I'll use the example if the roads department there's issues with snow removal. It's the same in every other OPP attachment area. I mean, I can refer to Elliott Lake, an area that I'm in. The roads department will call upon the officers to provide some assistance and guidance in clearing whatever the matter at hand is.
And my last question, sorry, I have one more. So I understand that there's cost savings, things are going to stay the same for the first 3 years, but do you account and make estimates for population growth in Espanola? Because that's currently happening. So with increased population, what will that look like in terms of policing? People are migrating to Espanola because the cost of living is very high in Sudbury, but the commute is still the same. So you cannot compare Espanola to Cochrane or Timmins or Elliott Lake. It's not the same. So how do you speak to that?
So there's no provision in the estimates for population growth. It's based on the formula and the existing calls for service and the number of properties that we currently have.
So you haven't accounted for that factor at all?
No.
So in retrospect, then we could have a really increased OPP cost savings. if our population grows?
If
which
our
is
population were to double, then yes, it would, but I can tell you that has not been our trend. Our population has
statements
been
last year
going
saying
down.
that out of all the Northern Ontario communities, Sudbury was the one area that would grow, which would likely include the Espanola area to grow. So you haven't accounted for population growth in that area.
All the data that we've been provided through the province, we do not anticipate our population growth we do not expect it to grow.
So you didn't account for population growth. You didn't look at it as a hypothetical. Right. Okay. That's all my question.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Johnny Blake again. I just got a couple of quick questions.
You may want to tilt that up towards you.
Like I said, my main thing here is to try and understand as much as I can. Now with the local police service board or whatever, our local police, they take direction from them. They go to them and say, okay, we need this, or we need to change and stuff like that. But the OPP, our police services board, no longer gives direction to the OPP. The OPP takes that under advisement. I don't know if that's true or not.
Just to clarify that if the town of Espanola were to contract with the OPP, it would be a Section 10 contract, and under a Section 10 contract, you're still legislated to have a police service board, and the role of the police service board is to discuss the objectives and priorities in your community and to discuss that with the detachment commander. So you shouldn't find a difference between your police service board and the authorities that they have with the detachment commander.
Okay, so I understand what you said. So basically, if we go OPP, the board advises. If we stay with the town police, they direct them. So that's a statement. No?
No, the board can direct the board's responsible for the objectives and discussing them with the detachment commander, and the detachment commander has to take those directions and objectives from the police services board.
Okay. We have a member from the board here from town. Do you just advise the police, or do you give actual direction of what you would like to see happen?
As a board, we meet once a month and we discuss chief's objectives. We cannot tell the chief what to do.
Okay.
The chief reports to us, and if there's any concerns, we discuss it as a board. And as to what was just said here about an OPP board, I was told by our ministry representative this week the laws are changing. The detachment commander is the person in charge of the board, and they will pick one person from each community to sit on that board. But basically, they're sitting on a board and they have no input. The detachment commander is the person in charge. That's what I was just told this week.
Okay, but currently, though, the chief of police answers to the board.
The chief of police, basically, to put it any other way, works for the board.
When the policing services when we're talking about in the future after the 3-year contract, and understand that the 3-year contract is based on, okay, we're going to have 12 officers in town dedicated to Espanola. At the end of that 3 years, because we keep going back from the acronym S something, whatever, the standard number of people. So at the end of the 3 years, you could just turn around and say, we decided now that Espanola needs 10 officers or needs 8 officers. Do I understand that correctly?
At the end of the 3 years, it would still be the priority between the police service board and the detachment commander to determine the needs in the community. Although they don't determine the number of officers that would be there, the number of officers could either be reduced or increased depending on the needs of the community.
Okay, but Espanola will not have a say in that.
Through the police service board, yes, they would.
Okay. Well, okay, so I think that's a roundabout answer, sort of thing, because whatever, that's my opinion. And the other thing, when you talk about revamping the station, I know the station here had their cells inspected, and that was by the Ontario Police Commission or whatever. and they were up to standard. So now, does the OPP have a different standard that says, okay, these cells are no more up to their standards, or is it based on the government standards? Does OPP have their own standards for what they want in the police station?
I would, in many aspects, they very well may, but I would have to clarify that with our facilities section to see what's actually legislated as changes or what are our changes based just on safety and safety concerns.
The only reason I bring it up is, like I said, if there was something wrong with their cells now, wouldn't we have to fix them? Because we have to actually the policing board or whatever in Ontario. We can't just say, no, we're going to have windows in the cells, and we're going to have this and that. It has to meet a standard. Now it's changed. We're going to have to upgrade those cells.
That'd be a question either Chief or Cynthia. Are you aware of any known shortcomings in your existing cells with respect to the provincial standards, whether they be disability or otherwise?
In relation to that question, first of all, I'd have to get a study done to find out for sure. I have not seen what the OPP's concerns are in relation to the cells. The cells are functional. Could they be improved? Of course they could be improved. What the police chief has to do annually is provide a equipment and facilities report to the board and indicate where improvements and enhancements are suggested or needs to be done. I haven't had a chance to do that this year yet, but that's something, as a result of this, I will look into. And you're right, if the cells have to be improved and enhanced by legislative requirements, then we would have to do that.
Okay, like I said, I want to get as much clarification for myself and other people too as possible. Thank you again.
Thank you. Sir?
Wayne Acton again. Just one question. If this is such a contentious item, why wouldn't we brought to a referendum? I said, if this is such a contentious item, why wouldn't it be brought to a referendum?
Oh, why wouldn't it be brought to a referendum?
You don't have to answer that now, but it's just something to consider, because I know one statement was made that they don't feel, somebody feels that they know enough that it doesn't have to be brought to a referendum, that the people should be allowed to vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Rick Freeman, and my question is directed to Cynthia. Earlier in the presentation, you indicated that there were going to be renovations made to the existing police station here in town and also to the OPP station out on the highway. Can you tell me what the renovations out on the highway are?
And what's needed on the highway?
That's been communicated to your council and those that are in the committee to make the determination, or on your costing committee. And to be quite honest, because to protect the integrity and security and the safety of the officers in both the Eskimo Police Service and that of the OPP detachment, they have the necessary information, but it's not something that I would be prepared to discuss at this particular moment, simply to ensure the safety and security of our members.
Well, that's not the answer I expected. But, quite honestly, as a taxpayer in this community, I don't see why we would be spending our tax dollars on infrastructure in another community. And I strongly object to that. Secondly, we've been told that we're going to save millions of dollars in years to come. My question to Cynthia is, how much of a decrease are we going to see in the tax bill?
That would be up to council at the end of the 5 years when we actually start to recognize those savings.
So in other words, we won't see anything like
Not until after the costs are recovered, which would be year 5.
Sir? If you come to the mic, please. You need the people at home to hear you. If this gentleman will give you his spot, yeah.
My name's Jim Bailey, and the only question I have is, the only money I've seen you talk about we're going to save tonight is on the 4 full-time and 3 part-time workers is the only way you're going to save money in the next few years. And I think that's a pretty poor way of doing things. Surely the town...
Thank you, sir.
This is for you. With all this money we're going to save, are we going to get our planters back at the highway?
That would go to council as well.
Judy Ramsey. The numbers are very perplexing to understand. I would just like to know if my logic is sound. On one hand, we have a known entity. We know what's been happening with our taxes. On the other hand, we're guaranteed X for 4 years, and after that, we know nothing. There are losses that will be incurred on this hand. Is my logic sound?
Is that directed to me?
It's directed to anybody because I'm not allowed to talk to them. And over there, they may have been taking notes, I don't know. But the input that's needed here is between us and them because they're going to be making the decision. So rather than talk to them, I'm talking to you. Is my logic sound? A known entity on one hand and unknown on the other with losses.
I would say that yes, most of your logic is sound, but I would say in the 4th year, I wouldn't say it's a complete unknown.
But on this hand, we have a known tax increase every year, salary increases, anything, repairs, that's more known than what's on this hand. Certainly. Anyway, that was my question, because I had to ask a question and not make a statement.
Thank you very much. Sure.
Bill Lee again. Sorry for giving so much time. I started out with only one question, it just prompted another one. We can't address council. We can address them. We can't answer.
That's right.
Just hold on. Let me finish. When is the vote? You have to answer that. When is the vote to be taken?
What's the agenda schedule?
It's on the agenda for Tuesday, this next Tuesday on the 24th.
Is Tuesday a drop dead date for a decision?
No, we have till May 22nd to respond to the OPP.
Okay, you said if we want to talk to council, we have to make presentations. Are we going to be able to make those presentations at that meeting?
Yes, if you let us know, we can definitely make sure that you're on the agenda. Well, we will allow time for delegations.
It's good. If everybody here came to that meeting, it could be a long one. I'll be prepared. The second question is, and I just want you to remind me, Acting Chief, what was the actual figures for policing, actual bottom line at the end of the year for policing in Espanola 2017? I only have 16. Do you know off the top of your head?
So in relation to that, you're asking me about our actual budget in 2017?
Actual, how much money was spent total at the end of 2017? Said and done.
Okay, so our 2017 actual was $2,450,969. But we did get grant revenues and fees of $259,125. And Cynthia wants to add more to that.
So what came out of our taxpayer dollars pockets was about 2.2 million, is that correct? Cynthia, what was the estimated total cost per year from OPP? Bottom line, what was the estimated cost per year?
Year 4 or
Year 1, year 2, I don't care.
So year one, without the one-time adjustments, I'm sure it was $2,170,000.
Now I'm really confused. 2.2 million, 2.1 million, you're going to save $1 million. Where's the math? I'm sorry, I was good at math in school, believe it or not, not much else. But that just doesn't add up.
I'm not claiming to save $1 million, certainly not in year one.
Wait a minute, you just told us that. You're going to save $1 million a year.
No, Cynthia said $1 million
By year 4.
by year 4.
I don't care what year it is. Year 4, the whole thing is just going to adjust accordingly. Right?
I don't think there's any point in arguing with her over her figures. She presented figures and she.
I want her to justify this.
Come by the office, by all means come by. I'll make time to see you and I can go over it with you.
But this isn't something just for me, this is for everybody in the room.
Well,
I don't care if it's year 1, everything is going to move accordingly. And 4 years from now, you know, both figures will be higher, but they're only $100,000 apart. There's no $1 million here.
Cynthia, the entire presentation, is it available now on the website or will it be available tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. I think the best, if you really want to understand the numbers and to drill down with Cynthia, would be to take that, analyze that, and then go back to her, specifically ask about the individual numbers, where they come from.
I'll do that.
Okay, rather than pick a number here and a number there.
I'm not picking numbers, these are numbers that have been given to me, I'm sorry. These are numbers, 2.2, 2.1, $1 million savings.
Yeah.
That's not the math, that's maybe the new math, it's not the math.
Well, thank you for that.
I just got a question for the OPP. When the next major motor vehicle collision happens on Highway 17, and it utilizes all the resources at the McCarroll detachment, is it a possibility that our 2 designated OPP officers in our Esquimalt area will be given responsibilities outside our municipality?
Good question. How do you handle that?
So you may have remembered I've mentioned the word integrated service delivery model. And so if we were to have a major event on the highway, of course we would use all of the available resources to deal with the initial response. Once that has calmed down and the officers are all redeployed to the zones to maintain an adequate service delivery. I will also add that the service delivery model is not limited to the Espanola detachment. So for example, if we have something, you use the example of McCarroll, or we can talk about Massey, if there's a major occurrence happening on Highway 17 West, those services are actually available from the neighboring detachment as well. So to avoid having to deplete resources from within the town zone, we can count upon officers from the East Algoma detachment, for example. Or if we're talking Highway 17 East, we can also count upon resources from the Sudbury detachment or Highway Safety Division officers as well.
But possibly our town will be left, if there is a fatality, officers are tied up for 6, 7, 8, 10 hours at a time. Quite possibly our town could be left without service for an extended period of time. Is that a possibility?
No, and again, to try to explain the integrated service delivery model, what we would do, and it's a possibility, because you have to remember we have platoons of 12. We could draw out resources from 1 or 2 resources from neighboring detachment, East Algoma, Sudbury, but we also have our neighbors in Little Current. So if an officer, for whatever reason, we have a major occurrence at 6 and 17, of course we're going to throw all hands on deck. But while that's happening, we're going to move officers within the Manitoulin zone. We're going to make sure that they're sliding over, basically a bit of a leapfrog effect that does occur to make sure that we're still maintaining continuity of operations as we're dealing with the major event. And the thing is from the integrated service delivery model, in my experience, we typically have the resources to cover that when it happens.
Thanks. I just wanted to know that was a possibility. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Wallace. I don't know how to best phrase this, but during the first 3 years, I'm pretty sure, in all the studying that I've been doing, is that if the town was to go OPP, the town of Espanola would have the same equivalent number of officers for those 3 years. Am I correct? With the exception of the chief, excuse me.
I believe that the inspector noted that there would be the same number of officers, yes.
The first 3 years. And that's why there's no cost savings in the first, no major cost savings in the first 3 years. Now, Mr. Noon was just up here and he wanted to know where the cost savings were. Did they not occur in year 5 to year 10, Cynthia?
That is when the biggest cost savings were.
Is it not over $1 million a year?
Yes, by year 5, it's about $1 million per year.
Okay, thank you.
And the first 3 years, the savings in comparison were roughly $350,000. That's because you're reducing the full-time chief to 20% of the chief, and you're contracting out your communications center. The other thing I forgot to mention that is included and reflected in those numbers is the discontinuation of the grants that we've received. There's no longer going to be the 1,000 officer grant or the another community policing program. It's about $100,000 in grants that we'll be losing, and it's going to be replaced by another PEM grant, but that's structured significantly different, and there's no guarantee. So that is definitely in those calculations as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You indicated that council will be voting next Tuesday at the council meeting, and then if we are interested, we can make delegation, make a presentation to council. What is the deadline to go to the town office and say that we would request to make a delegation?
So the deadline under normal circumstances has passed. So, but I mean, if you let us know by Tuesday, by the end of the regular workday on Tuesday, which is 4:30, we can make sure that we're in on there Tuesday night. And in addition, I'm sure that, you know, council wouldn't turn anyone down that came to the meeting at 7:30 and wanted to speak.
Thank you for the extension. I think it's really important. Can you please also get that information out onto the town website saying that there's been an extension and that the fact the deadline is passed is still going to be open for people wishing to make delegations about the OPP model. Thank you.
And just as I was about to thank everyone.
My name is Jim Dick. Now, you said on year 10 we're going to be saving $1 million type thing. Why don't you pass that secret on to the town police service boards now, and we can do it this year?
Is that everyone? Well, thank you. Thank you very much for your questions. You raised some excellent questions. Really appreciate that. I really appreciate the way you approached it. I'd also like to thank all of the members here who were so diligent in their answers and their presentations. I think you got some very thorough responses from these people, and they obviously put a lot of effort into knowing their particular material. I'd also like to thank council. You don't realize how tough it is to tell a council that they can't say anything. Okay? People run for council because they're oral communicators. They enjoy conversation. The provincial legislation ties their hands if they're not in a formal meeting and there's a quorum of them present. So this is as tough as anything they have to do. But I'm sure that they had the opportunity to hear from you and hear your questions, hear your concerns, and I'm sure they'll have further conversations as well. So thank you ever so much for coming.
I know.